Let us stop the abuse. Let us encourage other youth to stop paying money out there to go and kill themselves in another man's land. Nigeria has enough for us to hustle, to work, and then to bring life. Everybody out there, we're your brothers, we're your sisters. Let us help each other. Let us come together. Let us support NAPTIC. Let us put an end to human trafficking. And even those that are raping, NAPTIC is here for us. If you have been raped, if you have been abused, just come out. NAPTIC will help you. And then Nigeria will be a better place. From Nigeria, we can take it to Africa, from Africa to the world. And we're going to make the world a better place. Thank you.
Wow.
Big dreams, talent show, building the next entertainers.
How were you? I was thinking there would be a clap for that. Now, that is that. I'm sure we've been hearing of Big Brother.
Yes.
Huh?
Yes, sir.
Big dream, we are coming.
Yes, sir.
And the biggest thing of it all is that for you to be a pioneer participant, you are laying a founding foundation. So either way it comes from you, either way it goes, a legacy has been made. Before I go into introducing myself, I want to congratulate everybody.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Very soon, ABUJA will hear about you.
Amen.
Very soon, Lagos will hear about you.
Amen.
Very soon. So let's start from Cotonou or Togo. Because what is happening here is a global phenomenon. Everyone, at every point in time, and we keep seeing the trend, it keeps growing by the day. So when the idea came up as a company, we said, well, we want to be identified with this. So there are some, who are the people who, there's some two ladies who did an advertorial for 100%.
Nadia Dodge.
Where are they?
Yes, sir.
Please, can you stand up? Please, let's clap. For them, they have taken us to where we now have been in the next 2 years. Can I say free of charge? Yes, not free of charge. But I can tell you authoritatively, these two ladies will be our company brand ambassador for the next year. So my name is Ali from 100%. 100% is the pioneer company, and we are trying to see how we could be bigger than what we are today. So coming to identify with you was an opportunity, and I believe that by the eventual end of the program, we are going to be showing ourselves. So I'm here primarily for the cooking competition. For every participant, we are going to see how we could brand you and provide everything necessary for the program. Now, a very quick one. You see, what makes cooking good? It's beyond the cooking hand and the ingredients. What you use to cook it is very fundamental. Over the years, we know there are different kinds of oil in the market, but we now say, how can we improve on it? How can we make something different from the usual? We now say, fine. We know every other product, somewhere in the class of 90%, 99%. How can we attain or achieve the 100%? You see, with the way the brand is, it makes your cooking easier. True or false?
True.
You know, say false now. So, we are here to see how we could make the cooking competition interesting. Please, all of those that will participate, be very creative, do your best. Eventually, it's going to be rewarding. Something is going to go with it I don't know how it's going to run, the first, second, and third round, and lots of other consolation prizes. Oh, men, no woman should win here.
Yes.
Yeah. It was the day of our fathers that women cook better.
Yes.
But the current time now. So, it's going to be very interesting. Modalities for everything will be concluded today. Then we'll see how we can set up with the cooking competition. Any question, any contribution, any suggestion, we appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Your name, please.
Yeah, I'm Sam Alai.
Sam. Okay.
For the quiz competition, how many contestants will be needed, sir?
Okay. You will be made to know that.
Okay.
You will know that, I think, after now.
All right, thank
You
you.
will know. But I think it's going to be a privilege for anyone to be amongst it.
Okay.
Yes, it's going to be very good. So the whole thing about the idea is to be very creative. I was somewhere and they prepared ever, and I was asking this ever. The packaging and the presentation was so different. It was creative. So your creative ability, you put it into use. And that is just what makes it different. Don't think of the norm, what you are used to, the conventional thing. No, you have to go the extra mile. Not the extra mile of using like 10 cubes of Maggi in a small pot of soup. No, it's just something extra simple and distance. So I don't know if I've answered it. Another one? Okay. From the palm kernel. So it's in a natural state. And that is what you don't find with most oil. Most of them have been packaged to have a longer lifespan. But that is the different thing from it. So it is a pure and it is a natural oil. That's what makes it 100%. It is pure. Okay? Where are the ladies in the house now? Alright.
Good afternoon, sir.
Thanks.
My name is Okafor Raymond.
Okay.
We have two questions. First, I didn't hear me.
Okay.
And secondly, is it only 100% or you deal on or you have other products?
Okay. Alright, thank you. Let's start with the question. You see, it's a thing of principle. When you're standing before dangerous people, you don't mention your name. If you notice, for everyone that talks, I ask for your name. Do you know what? I'm standing before dangerous men here. My name will come last. Do you understand? What is most important here, and the reason for this place and now, is you guys. Do you understand? After now, the name will come. Then, what's the other question again?
What other products?
Okay. The company is purely to agro products. We deal with the United Nations. So aside palm, we're into other agro-aligned products, such as CSMC, millet, corn, rice, maize, peanuts. Most of those ones are for export to China, Australia, and other places. But because we are not going to be dealing with that, we are dealing with what would be needed here. That is the palm, soya oil, and vegetable oil. The chocolate brand. I think there was a company that used to do three before, but I think they could not sustain the palm oil. So we have the palm oil, the soya oil, and the vegetable oil. So whichever class or status you are in life, you must consume any of them. Right. So that's also we have other lines of businesses. This is what I'm saying.
2020, building the next generation of entertainers.
Big dreams, talent show, building the next entertainers. Ooh, big dreams, talent show, where we can all fly as winners. Oh, nah. Big dreams, you show your talent, big dreams. You go show your talent, big dreams. Whether na music talent, big dreams. You go show your talent, big dreams. On a drama talent, big dreams. Big dreams, you go show your talent, big dreams. Big dreams, talent show, building the next entertainers. Oh, big dreams, talent show, where we can all fly as winners. Oh, big dreams.
Big dreams, building the next generation of entertainers.
My brother, my sister, papa, mama, begin. Corona, no big pass us. We go fight we go win. As long as we remember to always do the right thing. Wash your hands, love each other. We go, we know. Corona, the virus, really worry human being. You know get Lego, but it dey waka from person to person. Oh, if it be time, if it stop time, if we maintain good hygiene and practice social distancing. My brother, my sister, papa, mama, and pikin. Corona, no big pass us. We go fight we go win. As long as we remember to always do the right thing. Wash your hands, love each other, we going on. Corona, na the virus, we the worry human being. You know get Lego, but you dey waka from person to person. But we fit beat time, we fit stop time, if we maintain good hygiene and practice social distancing, we going on. No shaking hands with your neighbor. Blow them a kiss from afar. Use soap and water to wage war. Let's show this thing who we are. We are special, we're courageous, we are awesome human beings. We dey super, we get power, we can conquer anything. If we hear word and obey laws and exercise discipline, wash your hands, love each other, we go we know. If it be like say you know well, like it's something they do you, and you feel say, you believe say, you get a seed it do you, and your body no grisogy, like it's something they do you. No let panic finish you, you go we know. Self-isolate for the sake of all the people where you love. Don't go around spreading rumors.
Jacob Nagri-Hume and prominent journalist Hopewell Chiono granted bail. And in the U.S., former Vice President Joe Biden visits Kenosha, Wisconsin. Join us for details after the break. This is Global View. Remember, you can watch us live on www.asoradioandtv.com/live. Also on Star Times TV channel 127 and Free TV channel 507. Now, the FCT chapter of the Nigerian Union of Local Government Employers, NOLGE, have suspended its planned industrial action earlier scheduled to commence tomorrow. The suspension followed the intervention of the FCT Minister of State, Dr. Ramatu Tijani Aliyu. President of the Union, Comrade Al-Hassan Abubakar Yakubu, disclosed this to ASO Radio and Television after the Union's executive meeting at its headquarters in Gwagwalada. Correspondent Abdullah Mokhtar completes the story.
Comrade Al-Hassan Yakubu said the meeting was to brief executive of the outcome of the meeting between the union representatives and the FCT Minister of State, Dr. Ramatu Tijani Aliyu, as well as other stakeholders on the issue that was prompting the strike. The FCT NOLGE president says it was agreed at the meeting that implementation of the minimum wage should commence in October this year, while the arrears amounting to about 6 billion naira will be sourced and paid subsequently.
The committee will come up with a modality of how that 7 billion will be generated and how that 7 billion will be disbursed. So that will be as one of the areas that the committee that she's going to set up on Monday will come up with.
Comrade Yakubu said Dr. Tijani Aliyu will inaugurate a committee to look into the matter within 2 weeks while the union waits on for further action. He urged members in the 6th Area Council to exercise more patience and the union executive work towards a mutual resolution.
They have been patient. In the next 6 weeks, we will still be patient. because we want to give the area councils the opportunity to look for that money.
Both Nolge, chairman of the Kuje Area Council and the Abuja Municipal Area Council, Comrade Numerate Koche and Hassan Haruna spoke to ASO Radio and Television on the development.
Action is the last hope of the staffs, and as such, we are open to dialogue, and that is what we have done, and we will give the FCTA administration every benefit of doubt from now to the end of October, and see if the implementation will be made as at when due.
The last option is strike action, but since there is negotiation, she have set a committee. We'll wait till 2 weeks.
Issues surrounding minimum wage in area councils of the FCT have been lingering but had to be put on hold due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Abdullahi Mukhtar, ASO Television News.
Meanwhile, the president of the Nigeria Labour Congress, NLC, Comrade Ayuba Waba, has expressed his displeasure over the increase of petroleum pump price by the ex-depot management. Comrade Waba at their fourth attempt after being detained for anti-government protest against corruption and economic crisis in the country. The protest, which was subsequently hampered by the COVID-19 pandemic, was denounced by President Emerson Mnangagwa, as he said it was an insurrection to overthrow the democratically elected government. The politician was fined $50,000 Zimbabwe and was ordered to surrender his passport and report to the police 3 times a week. Hopewell Chiono, who had tweeted his support for the protest, was also ordered by the High Court to pay bail of $120. Government critics and opposition activists have accused the government of attempting to muscle the press and using the COVID-19 lockdown to arrest, harass and torture activists, an accusation the government has denied. Meanwhile, South Africa President Cyril Ramaphosa, in a fresh attempt in Zimbabwe, said he would be sending a second batch of envoys. President Mnangagwa came to power after the military removed his longtime predecessor, Robert Mugabe, in November 2017 elections. He went on to win a disputed election the following year, promising to tackle corruption and revive the country's shattered economy. This is Global View. You can watch us live on www.asoradioandtv.com/live, also on Star Times TV channel 127 and Free TV channel 507. On Global View today, Nolge FCT chapter suspends industrial action scheduled for tomorrow. Zimbabwe protest leader Jacob Unganhun and prominent journalist Hopewell Chiono granted bail. Still to come, former Vice President Joe Biden visits Kenosha, Wisconsin. Join us for more stories after the break. And now to COVID-19 updates. South Africa, with cases above 628,000, accounts for most of infections in the African continent, with death rates surpassing 14,000. Egypt ranks second with confirmed cases still above 90,000, with 5,440 deaths. Morocco, with 63,781 cases, is third on the table with 1,184 fatalities. Nigeria's cases is still above 54,000, ranking fourth on the list with 1,023 deaths. Here is the COVID-19 situation in the African continent. Meanwhile, health authorities in Ghana express worry over disregard of safety measures by the public as the country records fresh spike in COVID-19 cases. The country, which was widely applauded for its response in tackling the virus, has said it will punish those who deliberately flout the safety measures. The Ghana President, Nana Akufo-Addo, in a televised broadcast, stressed on the sanctions that would be imposed on defaulters.
Let me remind those amongst us who want to continue to disregard these protocols that severe sanctions exist in our laws for such persons who will want to endanger the rest of the population through their actions and negligence. The law enforcement agencies will, where necessary, apply these measures without fear or favor.
Defaulters will also face a jail sentence of between 4 and 10 years or will have to pay a fine of $2,000 to $10,000. The country, which ranks 7 on the COVID-19 table, now has a total of 44,460 with 276 fatalities. And now to world update. Infections around the globe today is now over 26 million as death toll rise above 867,000 and recoveries at 18.4 million. Brazil is still scoring high with daily infections ranking second on the table as cases jumps to over 3.9 million with death rate above 122,000. India accounts for about 3.7 million cases, with total deaths at 66,491. Here are the figures around the world today.
Change can happen without violence and peacefully, although, as we see in other countries, change is difficult.
Protesters also rebuked the aggression from police officers assigned by the Prime Minister to harass demonstrators, stating that change could take place without violence.
The aggression comes personally from Borisov through the police chiefs he personally appointed. We have been protesting peacefully for 56 days, but he holds the power, as there is still money he wants to steal at the expense of the Bulgarian citizens.
However, the Prime Minister has agreed to resign on the condition that Parliament approves his proposed constitutional amendment calling for the election of a Grand National Assembly to pass a new constitution that it says would improve the independence of the judiciary and decrease the number of deputies. Halima Oyempemi, ASO Television News.
We now take you to India, where escalating tensions between India and China intensifies over India's new ban on 118 apps linked to China over security threats. The country's Ministry of Electronics and Information had received complaints about a security breach from the China-based apps. The said apps were alleged to have been stealing and transmitting users' information in an authorized manner to servers which have locations outside India. Although the ministry does not specifically mention China, it said the actions will safeguard the interest of Indian mobile and internet users. News reports, however, suggest that the ban may have been triggered by the ongoing border disputes between the two nations. Meanwhile, spokesperson of the China's Ministry of Commerce, Zhao Feng, has strongly objected to India's new ban, accusing India of abusing national security by imposing discriminatory restrictions on Chinese companies. He added that India's action will cause damage to India's investment climate as an open economy and will not only harm the legitimate rights and interests of the Chinese investors and services providers, but will also harm the interests of India customers. And that's it on Global View today. Before we go, we'll take a look at some of our top stories once again. Now, the FCT chapter has suspended strike action scheduled for tomorrow. Zimbabwean protest leader Jacob Nagarihun and prominent journalist Hope Belchi-Ono have been granted bail. And we told you that former Vice President Joe Biden visited Kenosha, Wisconsin. Remember, COVID-19 is not a hoax. It's our collective responsibility to flatten the curve. Stay safe and thanks for watching. I am Fatima Ibrahim. See you next time.
You're a caged human being. You too much, oh, you get power, you can conquer anything. Only if you hear word and obey laws and exercise discipline. Wash your hands, love one another. We go, we know. My brother, my sister, papa, mama, and Pekin. COVID-19, no big pass, we go fight and we go win. Just as long as we remember to always do the right thing. Wash your hands, love each other, we go, we know.
And the next thing we heard from the driver's seat was, who the hell are you? Would you get inside this bus?
The arrest. Either the reason is cultivated, is concocted, but they must have a reason. We that stayed in that community want to find out why maybe
I was traveling to the east the Sunday, December 23rd, and I had forgotten something somewhere where I work nearby my house. Of course, time got away from us and we had stayed too late, so it was around 11:30 to 12. So I saw a white bus pulling up. And I told my cousin, hey, we could take a bus. And the bus slowed down and she looked in and she saw only men and she was like, no, I don't think so. And the next thing we heard from the driver's seat was, who the hell are you? Would you get inside this bus? The person picked me up, dragged me and said, we thought say we'll be police and they run. I said, you never said you were police. I thought they were ritualists, especially in this day and age of, everybody going missing. I already saw myself in a bush about to have my head cut off.
And in a country where kidnapping rates, abduction rates, insecurity is high. A lot of times the women are confused. If a police officer or a law enforcement officer is going to arrest someone, you need to inform the person the reason why he or she is being arrested.
So I brought out my phone and I called my mom and I told her what happened. So as I was telling her, one of the guys was sitting opposite me in the bus and he said, see this one, and he slapped my face. And I'm like, Mommy, imagine he just slapped me right now as I'm talking to you. And my mom said, give him the phone. So I handed the phone over to him and he told my mom, now you be the madam, we send them go hustle, Abi. And he hung up the phone. We were all covered, we had no makeup on. There was no reason to look at me and assume I was a prostitute.
We go on raid. Definitely police go on raid. Police arrest when there's information. And a lot of evidences are being gathered before police can move into going on raid. Police are not allowed or permitted to do such barbaric action.
How to dream big. Welcome to the big dream.
Big dreams. Big dreams. Big dreams. Big dreams. Big dreams. Big dreams. Big Dream Nigeria Talent Show. Big Dreams TV Show 2020.
Exclusive to ASO Television.
My name is Oluwaseun Ayodeji Oshowabi, and I survived the coronavirus. There is so much information out there on how to protect oneself from contracting the virus, yet nothing prepares you for the shock of testing positive. When I found out I had contracted the coronavirus, it took some time and a lot of struggle to accept my reality. But as a survivor, one thing I can assure you is that the coronavirus is not a death sentence. More importantly, know this. If you get admitted at a treatment center for COVID-19, please stay strong and confident that you're receiving the best quality of care. I pulled through and I know you can. For people who remain COVID-19 negative, your status is not a license to stigmatize. Lend your support to infected and discharged persons.
This message is brought to you by the United Nations in conjunction with the Federal Government of Nigeria, the Federal Ministry of Health, and the NCDC. Take responsibility. Stay safe.
This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Gito Yowat. It's Wednesday, September 2nd. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees. So our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. COVID-19 is creating a new normal for school children learning by video applications and broadcast channels, including in Uganda. But while many embrace the new normal, not all families are able to afford paying for data or even electricity for the television, as Halima Thumani reports from Mukono in Uganda.
14-year-old Ugandan Musa Sewanyina has mastered the art of bricklaying. He should be in high school, laying the foundation of his education. But since Uganda closed schools in March to contain the spread of the novel coronavirus, Sewanyina has few options.
During the school break, I'm still reading my books. If we get money, we switch the TV on and follow the teachings. But I also do odd jobs, so I don't spend the whole day at home.
Unlike families who are financially able to study online, Sewanyinas cannot always afford the power needed to watch lessons on state TV or the $3 per day subscription. His mother, Naiga Rashida, says the past 5 months have been difficult with her 3 children at home.
I don't have electricity. I had even bought them a new television set, knowing they would use it to study. But there are times when even the solar battery doesn't charge and the television goes off.
Uganda vowed to buy televisions and radios for poor communities with school children, but has yet to act. A $150 million July World Bank grant is expected to soon help provide learning materials for students nationwide. But some Ugandan education authorities say the damage is already done, including from school properties that were sold off or sitting vacant.
The chairs, some of them were eaten by ants. So by the time we reopen schools, we may need now to replenish, to buy another set of furniture. And that again goes with it. But that said, the loss of jobs for our teachers and losing property, but even losing our learners. We are worried the sensible percentage may not come back to school.
Education charity groups like UWEZO, which means capability in Kiswahili, says COVID-19 has caused both a health and education crisis. When schools eventually reopen, says UWEZO Executive Director Mary Goreti Nakavugo, children will have to make up for lost time.
The starting point would be to try and give a simple assessment to understand the level at which each of these kids is. Otherwise, if you take them as a whole, many of them are going to be left behind. And the ones who are going to be left behind are mainly the ones in the low-income families.
Meanwhile, Uganda's Ministry of Education is planning a campaign aimed at parents to encourage homeschooling. Halima Athmani for VA News, Kampala.
Some poor women who have recently given birth in the Democratic Republic of Congo face a bleak choice: pay their medical bills or stay in detention with their babies in public health facilities. One baby was kept for a month. Anastasie Tudiesh has more from a maternal health center in Kinshasa.
Mama Maziba Maternity Referral Health Center is a public health facility serving some of Kinshasa's poorest residents. Nearly 80 babies a month are born in the maternity center here. But when mothers cannot pay their bills, they are not allowed to leave. 21-year-old Beloni Ngoi gave birth to her first child, Erika, during the coronavirus confinement.
They told us it would be a boy, so we did put aside the $35 needed. Then they told us they would do a C-section, so there were additional fees.
Beloni's husband installs cable television, but the confinement has left him without work, and the family is struggling to gather the $250 needed for the hospital bill. Until they pay, Beloni and baby Erika are not going home. Nishlin Ileko too is stuck at the hospital.
When I arrived to give birth, I had nothing. They eventually agreed to take care of me, but I had to discuss it a lot. I really had to beg.
Micheline gave birth to her third child, Marveline, and now cannot pay the $50 bill. She says she understands why she and other mothers are not allowed to leave.
They check up on us. That is the way of the world. Money fixes everything.
Dr. Eric Messina is director of the health center.
Go back home? How, my dear? There are people who have done the work. Some drugs that have been used, medicines we have used, many things we have used. And who is going to pay for that if we let them go?
This is a blatant human rights violation. Detaining an individual for default of payment, especially a woman, is violating the law.
Attorney Elodine Sinire Muzigirwa is a patient's rights advocate who says Congolese authorities must do more to help new mothers.
The minister
against Dr. Mukwege, which have been conveyed via social media and in direct phone calls to him and his family, followed his condemnation of the continued killing of civilians in Eastern DRC and his renewed calls for accountability for human rights violations and abuses. His life seems to be at serious risk.
Mukwege received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2018 for his work at the Panzi Hospital, which receives thousands of women each year. The hospital is located in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, where ethnic violence is rife. Colville said Mukwege had received death threats before and survived an assassination attempt in 2012.
It's essential those responsible are brought to justice and that the truth is known, both as a means to protect Dr. Mukwege's life, but also as a deterrent to others who attack, threaten, or intimidate medical workers and human rights defenders.
Congo's government is officially responsible for Mukwege's protection, though some is also provided by the UN peacekeeping mission in the country. President Felix Tshisekedi last week called on his government to take all necessary measures to ensure Mukwege's security.
That was David Doyle of Reuters with that report. The rape and murder of Khadija Madinatu Sako, a 5-year-old girl in Sierra Leone, has shaken the West African nation. The suspect, who is in police custody, is her half-brother. The child's parents are separated and now live in different countries. The murder victim and her sister, age 8, lived with their half-brother under the care of their aunt, Mariama Sadio Barry, Khadija's mother's older sister, in Freetown, Sierra Leone. I spoke to the father, Abubakar Sako, who now lives in the U.S. state of Delaware, and asked him how he learned of his daughter's death.
It was on my birthday, June 17, when my aunt called me, and she was in a shock and a panic, and she was trying to tell me that my daughter was dead. It took me a minute for my brain to settle down and try to absorb the message, while my family was trying to arrange, you know, the burial of my daughter because of the traditional belief and the religious belief. I said, I don't believe that. So please do not bury my daughter. I need my daughter's body to be examined.
I also reached out to Khadija's mother, Binta Sako, who lives in the United Kingdom and has not spoken publicly about her daughter's death. She responded in a text message, quote, "At this moment, I have nothing to say until after I have given a befitting burial to my daughter. Let the story be about her at this point in time. More so, I'm still in pain and shock of her death and circumstances surrounding her death. I hope you understand my current situation as a mother." Desperate for answers, Abubakar sought help from his state senator's office in conjunction with the U.S. Embassy in Sierra Leone to prevent the burial of his daughter due to the family's religious beliefs as Muslims. Currently, a decision on the burial remains in legal limbo in the Sierra Leone court system. In 2019, President Julius Maada Bio declared rape and sexual violence a national emergency as the country topped 8,000 reported cases of sexual and gender-based violence. But many activists believe thousands of sexual violence cases go unreported. Meanwhile, the attention attracted by this case has brought about a larger campaign of justice for rape victims in the country. Renowned gender activist ASO Fofana joined Sierra Leoneans protesting in Freetown, calling for justice for Khadija outside the Attorney General's office.
Some young people called Kid Advocacy Network decided to organize a protest, which we were all part of. We protested, we went to the Attorney General's office, and different groups came, but they were actually leading that. So we're expecting the alleged perpetrator to be charged for murder because it's a higher crime, and of course rape, but the main charge is murder.
The alleged suspects, the victim's half-brother Ibrahim Ba, 20, is being charged with the murder, rape, and strangulation of Khadija. He remains jailed without bail as the case is being heard in the court system. So far, he has not made any statement regarding the case. The aunt, Mariam Sajo Bari, however, is being charged with conspiracy to murder. Abubakar told me since the death of his daughter, he has not been able to get out of his house.
The way she dies, for somebody to go mess with a little girl at that age, and then end up killing her, is very, very sad. And then my oldest daughter too, I don't know how people think I'm going to take this. I really don't. It's very, very hard.
Tell me what you remember most about Khadija.
Khadija was a very smart little girl. You know, the neighborhood where she was born, she like the rock star in the neighborhood. Imagine about 1 year, some months. And she passed all the tests that typical 3-year-old child will pass. So I sent money to my sister to get her enrolled in school.
According to Edmund Fofana, CEO of the Sierra Leone's Kids Advocacy Network, which has been following court proceedings, the two suspects, Ibrahim Ba and Mariama Sajo Bari, have retained lawyers but have not testified yet and remain in custody. It is widely expected that the judge will move the case from the magistrate's court to the High Court for the final verdict. Stay with us.
Hello, I'm Lenore Moudou, your VOA health correspondent.
Let us be perfectly clear. All countries.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, the World Health Organization says there is no information or evidence suggesting that the coronavirus can be transmitted by mosquitoes.
There are 2 published studies.
It is a respiratory virus which spreads primarily through droplets generated when an infected person coughs or sneezes, or through droplets of saliva or discharge from the nose.
This happens during pandemics in the past.
For more information on COVID-19, visit who.int or contact your local or national health authorities.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Anger is mounting in Mauritius after a Japanese bulk carrier wrecked on its shores in July, spilling an estimated 1,000 tons of oil and diesel into the sea. It's polluting the island nation's world-famous reefs and lagoons, threatening coral and other marine life. Now its former president wants answers from the shipping industry. Amina Gurib Fakim is a biodiversity scientist who spoke to VOA's Heidi Adams-Fitzpatrick from the Mauritian capital.
Outrage in Port Louis. Mauritians fear an ecological and economic catastrophe is unfolding along their coastline, which many depend on for food and tourism. Africa's so-called paradise on earth is now streaked with oil and diesel as dead dolphins and other fish wash up on shore. The island nation's former president is sounding a global alarm. Amina Gurib Fakim spoke to me from Port Louis.
There appear to be various dimensions of harm here. Can you walk us through the hierarchy of what's worst about this spill?
Number one would be this
terrible disaster which is happening to our wildlife. The second one, which is of importance, is the role of the shipping industry to be addressing this, because this is not the first time it's happened, and it keeps on happening, and somebody somewhere must put a stop to this. The third one, of course, is the regulators. What is the role of the regulators? Because so far we haven't seen much noise around this. And then the fourth dimension is on the local front. Why did that happen? Why did it take so long for them to react when they knew that there was oil on board, when they had taken 12 days for a reaction to happen from the local players here?
Current President Pravind Jugnauth blames bad weather for his government's slow response, and he denies any wrongdoing. The ship's owners have apologized and say they're open to compensation claims.
Ma'am, what form of compensation and duration of compensation do you think would be acceptable?
This ship was not an oil tanker, because had it been an oil tanker, the compensation would have been straightforward. It was a cargo ship. And we know that cargo ship, the level of compensation is, of course, not the same as for an oil tanker. Who compensates for the loss of the livelihoods of these people? I went to see them, and I could see terror in their eyes, because they could see the livelihoods eroding away in that oils of the Wakashio. They have been out of job now for the past 6 months because of the COVID, which has wiped away 24% of our GDP coming straight from tourism. And now, as we start to emerge out of COVID, we see this. So how can we start to imagine the level of compensation that we deserve? And are they going to pay? We make a plea to the G20, because this industry has to be regulated. They have to be held accountable, because it happened now in Mauritius. It happened last month in Beirut. There's a ticking time bomb just outside Yemen as well. So why should we become victims to this kind of negligence, if I may use the word, because that's what it is? But somebody has to have the courage to speak to the shipping industry, because we know they're a very powerful industry, and might is not right.
That was former Mauritian President Amina Gurib Fakim speaking to VOA's Heidi Adams Fitzpatrick. Ignoring local officials' concerns over racial tensions, U.S. President Donald Trump visited Kenosha, Wisconsin, the site of violent protests triggered by the shooting of a black man by a white police officer last month, pushing his campaign message of law and order. VOA White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara has this story.
Protests and counter-protests greeted President Donald Trump's visit to Kenosha, Wisconsin, following violent unrest over the police shooting of Jacob Blake on August 23rd. The black man was shot 7 times in the back by a white police officer trying to arrest him. Defying statements from the Kenosha mayor and Wisconsin governor, who say the president's visit will trigger more racial tension, Trump toured a business area burnt down during the unrest.
And we're going to help them a lot. I think we're going to help them a lot.
Trump met with law enforcement, but not the Blake family. He pushed a message of law and order to tamp down months of sometimes violent protests around the country, wading deeper into the debate over racial tension ahead of the November election. This week, Trump suggested that a white teenager accused of fatally shooting 2 people with a semi-automatic weapon during the Kenosha unrest may have acted in self-defense, prompting more criticism, including from Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden.
Fires are burning, and we have a president who fans the flames rather than fighting the flames. But we must not burn. We have to build.
Trump blamed Democrats for enabling the violence, which he called domestic terror.
Reckless far-left politicians continue to push the destructive message that our nation and our law enforcement are oppressive or racist.
The president's response to racial unrest is becoming a key election issue, with some research suggesting it may motivate black voters to come to the polls. But despite the Trump campaign's laser focus on law and order, ultimately it may not change many minds.
Support, particularly among whites, for the protest movement has declined somewhat, but in a highly polarized country, Trump's base of support is stable, Biden's base of support is stable, and we're just not seeing that much movement despite news events.
Still, the Trump campaign is making an appeal to white suburban voters concerned by the violence, particularly in swing states such as Wisconsin. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News.
In our tech report, we have a fascinating story about two brothers, Boy and Bill, in Ghana, who are taking the fashion industry by storm, combining an array of recycled materials like second-hand jackets picked up from the biggest flea market, broken mirrors and glasses, and African wax prints to create their unique styles. For more on the brothers, Africa 54 technology reporter Paul Ndiho spoke to Elisha Bowie, co-founder of the Bowie and Bill fashion label in Accra.
Elisha Bowie, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paul.
You are a student at Pentecostal University College, but you are also venturing into fashion. Can you tell me a little bit?
And that made it an instant sensation because they loved the idea and because nobody was doing that.
I see you have on a beautiful, dazzling, I guess, bling jacket on you. Did you design that yourself?
Yes, I designed that myself, and it's part of the project that we are working on, our upcycling project that we are working on. Is a mixture of mirrors and pieces of the African wax print. That's the pieces which is left after we sew our jackets and our products. The pieces which is meant for the trash. We cut shapes out of it and embroider it and keep it for these ones that I'm wearing.
You've been working on a lot of things, but one of the things that you've done so well is giving back to the community. You're trying to empower the small guys on the street, the seamstress on the streets, the tailors, the what. You're trying to give them that opportunity to showcase their work. Speak more to that.
It was a project that we started last year, that we have to give the local designers a chance to also showcase their products. They also have equally amazing products, but they don't have the opportunity to showcase it because fashion shows are done in bigger hotels and it's expensive to participate and stuff, so they are always left out. So we came up with this idea that we are going to build platforms in communities where we are going to put them on. So we started, we registered some tailors and seamstresses on before the corona came in. We already started the mini version in high schools and universities where we took our clothes there and gave some of the students an opportunity. It was great. The students loved the idea because they told me they have never seen a fashion show like that before. They have not seen clothes like students wearing high fashion clothes to model, because it's always about music, performances, and dancing and stuff. So those are part of the projects that we are doing in the community to promote more fashion and for people to appreciate the designers in our country.
Thank you so much, Elisha Bob.
Thank you, too.
That was Africa 54 tech reporter Paul Ndiho speaking to Elisha Bowie, co-founder Bowie and Bill fashion label in Accra, Ghana. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.
Due to the global outbreak of the coronavirus, the Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees, so our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future as we reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We appreciate your staying with us on Straight Talk Africa.
Hello, you are welcome to Straight Talk Africa, coming to you from my home in Arlington, Virginia, a suburb of Washington, D.C. I am Shaka Sali. Distinguished guests are David Onserio Monda, Professor of Political Science at the City University of New York, and Nyaka Lagoke, Assistant Professor of History and Pan-African Studies at Lincoln University. First of all, gentlemen, to be honest with you, I am profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to have the opportunity to host you again on this special edition of Straight Talk Africa.
Thank you so much for having us, Shaka.
Thanks again, Shaka, for the opportunity.
You're most welcome, Ndugu brothers. First of all, David, you are, of course, an expert probably on this issue that we are talking about, the constitutional term limits. What exactly does that mean? What is the importance, first and foremost, of constitutional term limits?
I think that basically means that whoever holds office cannot hold that particular office, whether it's president or prime minister, forever. There has to be a period of time when they are in office, and then they have to seek a mandate from the people on whether they can continue in that job or whether they need to leave. And that mandate usually in some countries it's 4 years, and then you have to seek a mandate from the people, or 5 years or 7 years. It depends on the term. But the idea with term limits is you cannot continue to rule forever. And the idea with that, for example, in the context of the United States, is that George Washington didn't want to become a king because he was asked to run for a third term and a fourth term, and he refused. And the idea with the context of the U.S. was that we wanted to have term limits when, whether you're an excellent president, you get to give someone else a chance. And the last choice, and they do that usually through elections or through plebiscites, through people power.
Interesting. Nyaka, what about you?
Well, yes. David gave a nice overview, and then I'm not going to repeat, what he said about the differences between a monarchy and a republic. The only thing that I wanted to add is that the good thing about a presidential term limits is that it gives the possibility, to see democratic changes in the society. And then in the light of what we saw or we experienced in Africa with those leaders in the aftermath of African independence who stayed in power for a very long time. For instance, in Ivory Coast, Houphouët-Boigny was there for 33 years. In Gabon, it was like Bongo the father was there for around 40 years. Same thing with Yadama the father.
Why don't you say Omar Bongo or Bernard Bongo? If he was if he was feeling good with the French, he was Bernard, and if he was feeling very well with the Middle East, he was Omar Bongo.
Okay, the Omar Bongo, the father, in Gabon. So Togo, 40 years, Mobutu, maybe around 35 years. So in the light of this, when the African had the opportunity to decide the framework, democratic framework, many of them thought that a presidential term limit was a good thing, to foster democratic changes in the society. It's not like it's going to solve all the ills in the society, but at least, it gives an opportunity to see new blood leading, our countries. The other thing that we need to know for those who are listening to us yes, George Washington, that was in the beginning of the creation of the United States. And then we had in the 18th century. And then later on, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was going to be there for 4 terms from 1932 to 1945, then because of what George Washington started and because of the tradition that people saw in the United States politics, 1 or 2 terms, then when they saw Franklin Delano Roosevelt being there for 4 terms and he died on April 12, 1945, he did not finish his 4th term. And then this is how they decided that they were going to make some amendments, to put some term limits in America. And then this became a part of a political tradition on the world stage. And this is how Africans today are doing what they can in order to foster and then to enforce the presidential term limits, which I support, by the way, because if somebody wants to do some work, in 4 years, you can do it. Thomas Sankara did it. In less than 10 years, you can do it. Kwame Nkrumah did it. In less than 6 months, or maybe no less than 1 year, you can do that. Murtala in Nigeria did it. So we have examples in Africa of people who did the right thing in a short amount of time. We should not forget that Nelson Mandela was there for only 1 term when he had the possibility to be there for 2 terms. And that was a very important symbol.
But would it really be fair for you to give an example of the Osagefo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana? Dr. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, the last time I checked, he actually reigned at a time when Africa embraced the one-party state. And there were no clear constitutional term limits. If he wasn't overthrown in 1966, he probably would be still with us.
No, he's a human being. Maybe he would have died. Maybe after he would have died, or maybe after. Yes, I understand. It's a very good point that in the aftermath of independence, and sometimes when people talk about those African leaders, I see some people, they want to say Nkrumah was a dictator and Nkrumah was not. No, all of them, in the aftermath of independence, they thought that one-party system will be the framework through which they could promote national unity and national reconciliation. Ofugonye did it, Nkrumah did it, and then many other leaders. Even though during colonialism, there were multi-party system. So yes, but when I was mentioning Kwame Nkrumah, I just wanted to say that he achieved so much in a short amount of time. That's why I mentioned Kwame Nkrumah. It was not about the presidential term limits.
And you have a point there, definitely. Let me come back to you, David. You talked about, of course, the need for constitutional term limits in a republic. But there are also some other exceptions, David. You could actually be a republic and have a parliamentary system. And if you have a parliamentary system, you could actually be a prime minister for a very, very long time. There are no term limits when it comes to parliamentary system. Helmut Kohl, for example, in Germany, he ruled almost like some African dictators. But in his particular case, and in fairness to him and his country, Germany, he offered himself every 5 years to the electorate. And the electorate chose him to be the Chancellor of Germany.
So this is very true. And if I may, let me just go back very briefly to what we've been talking about with, for example, Hifikepunye and Kwame Nkrumah, the Osagefo. So we also need to remember their context was also different because they were ruling during the period of the Cold War. So there's also that dynamic when the East and West were really trying to find their patrons on the continent. Now, post 19
for example, Mauritius. And Mauritius in particular seems to be doing everything that seems to be a beacon of hope for African democracy.
I think that it's not because people adopt a parliamentary system that's why they should not embrace term limits. Right. I think that, like I said, and then many researchers said it, it's a good thing. Yes, Angela Merkel, she's still there in Germany, but I think that in a party, it is possible to find somebody else who can do what she's doing. And then that impression of being an indispensable person in a political party or in a state, that too need to be changed. In America, yes, we see prediction term limits, which is a good thing, but at the same time, the senators they are in power for forever. And the example I always like to give is that of Robert Byrd, the late Robert Byrd of West Virginia.
Correct.
He was a senator for 50 years, 50 years. And that's not right. In a country like the United States, I think that they should also think about term limits, at the level of the Congress. So I think that this can give the possibility to renew the political class, to renew the leadership in the society. And it's not because people in Germany seem to be working that democratic system. That's why they're not going to embrace like the term limit. So this is what I think. So I wanted to add that. Yes, good.
Shaka, if I could also jump in on that point. So there's both positives and negatives in terms of term limits. So, for example, the example the professor just mentioned with Orrin Hatch, and also with Joe Biden, who's been in the Senate for close to 47 years now. So also having term limits, one of the advantages with not having term limits, for example, with the Senate, is there's this argument that you need that expertise, Shaka. You need someone who's been in the Senate for a long time, because they have the expertise, they have the wisdom of bringing people together. In the context of the United States, the country is very evenly split equally between Republicans and Democrats. If you look at the Senate, it's almost equally split. So the argument for not having term limits is this idea that you get individuals with experience that know how to compromise, that have established this trust network across the aisle and are able to bring people together. But the disadvantage again with that is that you have entrenched interests, and sometimes when someone's been in office too long, they tend to forget the interests of their people. And in our context, for example, in U.S., you have this in the case of the senator from Maine, who's currently facing a significant, challenge to her leadership in that state. So there's both advantages and disadvantages to term limits.
Interesting. Nyaka, what about the fact, for example, that as a senator, yes, you have power, but you can't quite possibly compare the power of a senator to or with the power of a sitting president.
Yes, of course. I agree with you. When you're a Senate, you represent the state in the case of the United States, or some regions like in some other parts of the world. But maybe today we may not have the opportunity to talk about that. In my reflections and then things I've been thinking about, I think that people need to think to renew the political and democratic system. Yes, there are many good things in the American democratic system, even though there were some pitfalls since the inception of this country. The fact that African Americans and some other minorities have been ostracized. But the idea of democracy in the 18th century, when Europe was still attached to monarchy, and David mentioned that passing, and then the idea of constitutional monarchy in England, and then after the glorious revolution. So we saw that all those things are positive, but today in the 21st century we can think about a new democratic system, and then being senator for 50 years, then I cannot full constitution in Ivory Coast. But we knew that there were some issues in the constitution, even though people wanted to resolve the issue, they want to resolve some problem in the society. For instance, Ufo-Boigny stayed in power for so long, they said, you know what, let's put presidential term limits. Bédier became the successor of Ufo-Boigny, as if we were in a monarchy. Also, they resolved that too in that Article 35. And Mr. Ouattara, who was going from one country to another country and changing citizenship, according to many, they say, you know what, if you want to be a president in Ivory Coast, you have to be an Ivorian, a born Ivorian, of a father and a mother who were also born Ivorian. Ouattara said that this constitution was against him. And then we know what happened, a rebellion, everything. But now, Mr. Ouattara now he became president. What did he do? And if you give me 2 minutes, I want to talk about that because it's a very important element for people to understand. What did he do? He put together a committee of experts led by Mr. Professor Uraga Obu, who was in Gbagbo's party, and then who had later on some dissension with Gbagbo. And then in that constitution, they took into account, and Uraga said that Mr. Ouattara's needs or desire, or some of the things he wanted to see in the constitution. The first thing, we have a president and now a prime minister. Back then, now Ouattara said he wanted to have like a vice president. So one thing that he wanted. Number two, the clause related to the nationality, they changed it. That if you want to run for president in Ivory Coast, you have to be exclusively Ivorian. In other words, you can be a citizen of America, a citizen of France, a citizen of Burkina Faso, and then if you can claim to have the Ivorian citizenship, when you are about to run, then you renounce to the other citizenship, and then you can become the president of Ivory Coast. But the notion of the attachment of the land has been put aside. So Mr. Ouattara did that, and there are so many other things. So my point is that our constitution to 2015, 2020, that it has been amended, but we cannot say that it is impersonal. It is put together by Mr. Ouattara so that he can serve his interests and then keep power in the hands of the Northerners. I just wanted to talk about that.
I see. Now, David, what about the fact that when somebody becomes a president, that particular individual swears an oath to defend, to protect, and to preserve the Constitution that allows that particular individual to assume the office of the president. Isn't it unconstitutional, really, for that particular individual to preside over the changes of that particular document, or to benefit from changes from that particular document in order to serve another term in office?
I think that becomes very problematic. And this goes to a point, Shaka, you had raised earlier about amending constitutions. The U.S. Constitution, for example, has been amended 27 times in 400 years. That is 4 centuries. They've only had 27 amendments.
Right.
If you look at the U.S. Constitution, you also realize the threshold to amend the Constitution is very high. It's not easy just to go and amend the Constitution. So that's another constitutional safeguard. The third element of alluding to what you've mentioned, Chaka, is this idea of the letter and the spirit of the Constitution. So those are two different elements which are related but are also very similar and important in the context that as much as you're the executive and you can coalesce different coalitions to change the Constitution as many times as you want, but the spirit of the Constitution is against that, which is part of these safeguards you have in the Constitution to say that, for example, in the United States, you need an absolute majority. You need 3/4 of the states, 3/4 of the members of Congress. That's a very high threshold. And what that tells you is that we want to make the process of amending the Constitution very difficult so that you don't have an individual who wants to stay in power forever. If I may add, Shaka, if you take the example, for example, of Egypt, Mubarak with the National Democratic Party was in power and played around with the constitution.
By the African Union and the international community. Any particular reason, for example, why the African Union and the international community do not also agree, do not also reach a point where they say, if you are an incumbent president, you have stolen an election. In other words, you have had an election whose results do not reflect the will of the people, but the will of those individuals who count the votes, who you have previously appointed to the Electoral Commission, and that the international, for example, and domestic observers who monitored those elections say those elections were neither fair, nor free, nor credible. We are not going to do business with you as usual. Also, if, for example, an incumbent shifts the constitutional political goalposts on his watch, why doesn't the international community apply the same measures, the same policy, the same attitude? They don't want to do business with a soldier who has seized power unconstitutionally.
Okay. This is the question is a profound, it's a deep question, and it's a serious question. I commend you for it. We will not have time to go to talk about that, but I'm going to try and answer. And then, first of all, I would like to say something as to distance myself a little bit from what David said. When he's talking about Mali, it looks like he's falling the trap of the international media presenting what happened in Mali as a coup d'etat. The first thing is that it's not. If we think that it is a coup d'etat, we may have a simplistic way of analyzing. So when we are analyzing African politics, we have to be cautious. Yes, there are many good things, like in the European societies, that we can claim, but we cannot just say, for instance, that like in Mali, it's just a coup d'etat. No, it is a people's movement, a people's power movement.
Time is not our best ally. We'll go for a break, and when we come back, we shall continue with our conversation.
Is about more than just sitting here and talking about women's issues. It's about listening to them
and bringing their opinions to the table and making sure their voices are heard.
Because our lived experiences, our stories, and our voices will help shape the next generation.
That Ugandan president, Yoweri Museveni, was uniquely gifted to such an extent that the country could not possibly do without his leadership skills?
No, so it's, this is a fallacy. And then the real reason why Mr. Ouattara is seen by his supporters as somebody who is uniquely gifted to rule over Ivory Coast is because they think that with him, the power can stay in the hands of the Northerners. If you want to analyze Ivory Coast politics from the ethnocentric perspective. And yes, Mr. Ouattara has some qualities as a leader, but he's not an indispensable person. And then Ivory Coast survived Houphouët-Boigny, who was there for 33 years, and then who thought he was an indispensable person. Yes, this is not how we can see things. And in the beginning of this show, I remember when we were talking about term limits, and I even said that even at the level of Congress, at the level of the parliament, people need to think about renewing the political elite. So if Mr. Ouattara wanted to find some people in his party to replace him, he could have done it. In the beginning, he said that he had trained people. And then like 2 weeks ago, and he said like in something that was so, and people were even laughing at him. Oh yes, do you know how much time it took me to train Amadou Gon Coulibaly? You cannot just train somebody like in 2 months or 3 months. That's a joke.
The late Coulibaly.
The late Coulibaly. So it means that you, in 50 years, then you train only one person. And that's one of the things.
But Nyaka, wait a minute. You allege here that Alassane Ouattara wants to stay in power simply because, in turn, we are talking about the northern part of Ivory. Or was it arranged by someone for him to die at this point in time?
Many people in Ivory Coast were saying, some, that yes, Ouattara put Gon Coulibaly there, and then he wanted Gon Coulibaly to die before the election. I could not agree with that.
But this is a man who had a heart transplant.
Yeah,
in 2014.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. He had a heart transplant, but this is what I know. I don't think that Ouattara said that he was going to choose Gon Coulibaly because he knew that Gon was going to die before the election. I don't have any evidence. When I don't know something, I don't talk about it. But what about circumstantial evidence? No, this is what I'm saying. What I suspect is that he knew that the guy didn't have a long life, that he thought that the guy could become the president. That was plan B. And then if the guy becomes the president...
And there was no plan C?
No, there was no plan C. And then...
But plan C, in fact, was Ouattara.
No. Ouattara is not even... Ouattara is plan A. Is plan A and plan Z. It's about him in the beginning. It is because he was forced by the United States, by France, Macron, and the international community. That's why he accepted to choose Gon Coulibaly. But he was hoping that when Gon becomes president, that his brother could become the vice president. So that was the plan. To answer your question, the divine intervention exposed his plan, and then he was now therefore obliged to come out and say that he's going to run in the name of stability and progress and all those things. Yes.
So basically, when we look at Ivory Coast politics, the only constant is Alassane Ouattara.
The only what?
Constant.
Yes. This is what he wants to. This is what he wants to see.
Very interesting. Let me ask you this question, David. You know, there are people who say some of these long-serving incumbent presidents, for example, you can talk about, for example, the president of Equatorial Guinea. Equatorial Guinea, this is a man that came to power in 1979. He is the world's longest ruler is still going strong. When you talk about a man of Equatorial Guinea, you talk about some other specific individuals in the continent, some people who have followed them very closely will tell you these are people who do not feel safe outside of State House with their families. But when you think about a man sincerely, like Alassane Ouattara, PhD in economics, from one of the most prominent universities, not only in the United States, but in the world, University of Pennsylvania, the Wharton School of Business. You have a man who was the #2 deputy director of the International Monetary Fund in Washington, D.C. for
around in Africa. We've had a lot of our leaders, Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, Mugabe, educated in some of the most sophisticated Western institutions. Unfortunately, when they come on the ground in Africa, they are mixed in with our patronage system, which isn't in and of itself bad. But I think they fail to establish institutions that will allow the country to move on after they have left power. And I think this is part of the problem in Ivory Coast with the legacy of Houphouët-Boigny. This is part of the problem in Equatorial Guinea, because you have to entrench institutions, and term limits are part of that process, because it allows for the country to breathe, it allows for new ideas, and it allows for those clientelist patronage network to be broken down. So this is why term limits that we're talking about today is so important. You need to be able to have different individuals with different skills coming in. So, and also in conclusion, I think Obama said it best when he addressed the African Union. If you're a leader in Africa and you say that you're staying in power because there's nobody else that can take over power in the country will implode. For example, what's happening in Uganda or with Kagame in Rwanda, then you have failed as a leader, because part of the process of being a leader is to be able to nurture and develop individuals to take over from you, because human beings are not immortal. So I think in a lot of these contexts, part of the bigger, broader problem is lack of development of strong institutions and lack of the leadership from those in power to create transitional spaces for new people to take over the country and for institutions to allow for this turnover of the leadership. I think that's one of the big problems we have on the African continent.
But what about, how do you explain, for example, some of the few individuals that have actually done what you criticized and yet have had the courage and wisdom to allow transition under someone else? Your own country, the Republic of Kenya. You had, for example, Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi. He was in power for 24 years. You had in Malawi, you had Dr. Hastings Kamuzu Banda, a man who held an election 1993 to find out whether people were still interested in one-party state or they wanted a multi-party system. The people who wanted a multi-party system won that election. The following year, 1994, he stood for election, even though he had actually previously been life president, was defeated by Bakiri Muruzi. He considered defeat with grace, and there was smooth transition. You have had people like Tanzanian founding president, Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere. You had Senegal. You had Leopold Sédar Senghor, a man who came close to winning, in fact, a Nobel laureate for literature. The man who was one of the co-founders of this idea of negritude. You have had several other individuals on the continent who have served their countries, but at the end of the day, they put everything aside and made sure that they put the interests of the country above those of their political parties or their individual selfishness and greed.
So you raise an interesting